I want to welcome everyone here at the chapel as well as everyone who's viewing online. Just a gentle reminder for those of you present here at the chapel, if you have a cell phone with you today, please place it in the silent mode or turn it off completely. That would be appreciated. Officiating this afternoon is Cantor Stephen Storr from Congregation Beth Shalom.
I believe you were handed a service pamphlet, which, if I'm not mistaken, should have the 23rd Psalm in the inside page. And if you would read that, lending your voices to this tribute today for Sallie, then I think that'd be a beautiful way to begin, if you would. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths. Yea, though I walk through the valley, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me and mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord. Thank you so much. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai rohi lo echsare, b'nodeh sheyarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yenahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begetz amavet lo yirara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha mishantecha hema yenachamuni. Tarok lefonai shochan neged sorerai. Deshanta b'shemen roshi kosi rivaya. Aktova chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai. V'shavti b'vet Adonai le'yorech yamim. This is a reading called This Is My Prayer by Dr. Hillel Bavli. This is my prayer to you, my God. Let not my spirit wither and shrivel. May my heart be open to every broken soul, to every orphaned life, to every stumbler wandering unknown and groping in the shadow. Bless my eyes, purify me to see humanity's beauty rise in the world and the glory of our people. And when my time comes, let me slip into the night demanding nothing, God, of humanity or even of you. Esa enai el harim, me'ayin yavo ezri, ezri mim Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. Al yiten lamot raglecha, al yanum shomrecha, hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha yad yaminecha, yom hashemesh lo yakecha v'yorech b'layla. Adonai yishmorcha mikora, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor et tzedcha v'oecha, me'ata v'yad olam. Ecclesiastes offers that there is a time for every purpose under the heavens. There are days to be born and sadly days to die, days to plant and days to harvest, days for war, please God, days for peace. And this time of mourning is a complex one, a lot of sadness, but a lot of beautiful, sweet, joyful memories as well. This psalm that I just sang, the 121st, says that we should lift our eyes to the mountain, for when we need help, our healing, our help will come from Adonai, the creator of heaven and earth. For the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. It's a difficult reading to read at a time like this in world history. The things that are happening in the Middle East that are so painful for so many. For you, Sallie's absence from your lives is remarkably personal and remarkably painful. And sometimes living here in Chicago, we know how much violence happens in our city every week. But it's further downtown. It's further past the city. We don't really need to concern ourselves with it, so we'll change the channel or turn the page in the newspaper. And then it starts to happen in places that we're a little bit more connected to, such as Israel for some of us in this room. And it becomes more personal, but then the numbers are 100, 1,000, 10,000. What are the numbers going to be? We don't know, but they become less personal because we can't connect to that. When we heard the number 6 million during the Holocaust, we couldn't relate to it. It was just too big of a number. But if you imagine everyone who's being lost right now on both sides of the borders are somebody's Sallie. Each of those losses are painful. And I hope that we will each do all that we can do to help bring peace. Sallie has now found her peace, as difficult as that is for us to accept, because she was a force du jour, right? She was a force to be reckoned with. But now she has found her peace, and let us pray that our world does as well. Who am I kidding? Here we go. The few times that I visited Sallie, she had the whole scenario of this final day planned out. She was hoping that she could pass on Shabbat. She thought passing away on Shabbat would make her an Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor who passed away on the holiest day of the week. But alas, she did not. She wanted to hear the eulogies that were going to be offered today while she was still alive. She said, "Jeffrey was so funny at Irv's, I want to hear mine." But alas, that didn't come to fruition either. She wanted to live to know the twins, Sloan and Charlie. She wanted to be able to buy them their high chairs and strollers. She was glad to know that her grave would be facing Saks Fifth Avenue. And she let me know that the foot doctor who came in to see her was garnished, right? Wasn't worth anything. And she often spoke about the branches of her tree, Ian, Felice, and now Ruslan, Chad, Brittany, and Rob, Amanda, Josh, and Patel, David, Dana, and how smart you all were. How she wished for your happiness, and she just kept saying, a big isn't, just be healthy and just be well. We're having the pleasure of listening to some of her grandchildren offer some of their thoughts today. So let me call Chad, Brittany, and Amanda first, and then I'll invite one or two more.
Do you want to stand here? You're the shortest. Those two. Just this one? Yeah. I feel awkward.
She would have loved this. Everyone talking about her, the center of attention, all of the fanfare.
Mama was truly one of one. She was hard-headed, high maintenance, fiercely fabulous, and we never saw her without her makeup perfectly done, her hair coiffed just right, and a chic outfit on, usually from Chico's. Even in the end, she always looked stunning, skin glowing, eyebrows fully on.
Yeah, Mama took shit from nobody. Not even her grandchildren. Like that one time we were in Florida making too much noise at the restaurant, and Mama kicked me under the table. And I was like, she just kicked me. And she's like, no, I did not. And I was like, yeah, you did. And then my parents were like, did you kick him? And she's like, I might have.
She loved to joke, often at someone else's expense, typically that person being our papa. But she often had quick quips of her own. For example, when you'd call her voicemail, it would say, please leave a message. I'm out bungee jumping. Or when a nurse at Elevate Care accidentally bumped her wheelchair into the door, Mama exclaimed, good thing I'm not pregnant. Or a Sally B classic would be when asked by doctors, "What's your name?" She'd say her name was J-Lo. Doctors were never sure if she was a smartass or seriously confused.
One of our favorite stories that we always heard about Mama was that she won first place for Miss Albany Park. It was something she took pride in and she loved sharing with us. And then it surprised us when we found out she only got second place.
Mama was determined. Her drive to make it to her 2021 downtown wedding did not come easy. We kind of thought she was living for that moment. But she made it there, and she even managed to make a speech.
From the day we were born, Mama and Papa made it to every dance competition, band performance, baseball game, and even the worst of the worst piano recitals. Not only was she warm and inviting to us, she had an incredible ability to make strangers feel so special. You could count on her to compliment your hair, outfit, perfume, you name it. But just know, if you were once a stranger and she made you feel special, she told all 5'2" of me that I had gorgeous dancing long legs. Do with that what you will.
Mama was a showman. Her home was always immaculate. Her white couches were pristine. Everything was in its perfect place.
Yeah, she'd even know when I was in her living room just by my footsteps.
On the carpet.
On the carpet. Sorry, the carpet.
Our mom would always say that she would eat off her floors. Not to worry, Cheryl. There was enough food on the table. At Mama's, there was endless amounts, and she was always the hostess with the mostest. There were bagels, haystacks, lemon squares, gefilte fish, lox, peanut butter squares, applesauce, matzo ball soup, always at her house at all times, but never ask her for a recipe because she would always conveniently leave out one ingredient. That was the Sallie signature.
Growing up, Mama would take us on shopping trips, impressing us by knowing every employee at Bloomingdale's. She taught us the art of being a girl on the go. And my sisters wrote this. While she would be parading us around Naples or frolicking around at Lincolnwood Fest, she was the head bitch in charge, introducing us to all of her carny pals.
As the grandkids that lived local, one of our favorite traditions growing up was celebrating Halloween with Mama and Papa. So many memories going to the pumpkin patch, visiting the spooky Baskin Robbins, and carving pumpkins. Halloween was our tradition, so it makes sense that Mama held out for just one more Halloween.
We were so blessed to have Mama for all of these years, and I'm so grateful that she got to spend a lot of time with my husband, Rob, who she called the kid from Kentucky. And I'm fortunate beyond words that she was able to meet and spend a lot of time with our twins, her great-grandchildren, Sloan and Charlie. Our daughter Sloan was named after her, something that is considered pretty taboo in Judaism, but to which Mama said, why put off the inevitable? Sloan is already proving to be pretty sassy, just like her great mama.
Our mama was relentless. If she called and you didn't answer, she'd call again and again and again until you answered, and the conclusion of each call went something like this. Bye, Mama. Bye, sweetheart. I love you, Mama. I love you more. And round that went. But now we can all say for certain, no, Mama, we love you more.
You know, when there's other family members speaking and I don't see their words prior, I'm always worried that we're going to repeat after one another too many things. But we didn't. I just have to cross out the head bitch part. I had She spoke often about her endearing brothers, Teddy and Sydney, and then niece and nephews, Charlene, and her nephew, Reb David Sitnik, who she was proud to tell me was studying Rabbi Schneerson's book at the time. She was so very proud. And the names of the children, the next generation just flowed off of her tongue like honey. She really absorbed and loved each of you personally. I believe Josh has something to offer for us today. And then I'd like to invite Ian up after that.
I'm going to be reading some words from Mama's nephew, David Sitnick, who was the son of Mama's brother, Teddy. And this is addressed from David to Linda, Jeff, and Tammy. Dear Linda, Jeff, and Tammy, it's hard not being with you now, but I'll do my best to share your feelings of loss from here. The connection between hearts is not limited by place. For many years, your home was a second home for me. It was happy, warm, and welcoming. I often came alone on my bicycle when I needed, to me, what represented a normal life. Not sure where he got that from. Both your mom and dad made each visit special. Dad would present me with a challenge to stretch me intellectually or physically, either with difficult riddle-like scenarios or a quarter for every push-up more than 50. Mom's approach was some type of treat that she made. I always left happier. Your house was a hangout for many, especially local family, plus relatives who visited from out of town, and cousins. Joni and Steve were regulars. I have the fondest memories. Aunt Sally respected her parents with Yiddishkeit, saying, I do this for Pesach because it's how Grandma did it. Or use the head of a horseradish for karpas because it's how Grandpa did it. Yiddishkeit was part of her home and upbringing. She even gave me Grandma's Siddur as a gift. She had a pleasure when others derived pleasure through her. Aunt Sally also had a strong devotion to friends. She was a beloved and devoted friend to many. Plus, she was devoted to Uncle Irv, trusted him and relied upon him, setting herself aside. She certainly was an Isha Kashira, which in the Torah's standards is a great accolade. Once a person's body is laid to rest, the neshama is released and can be reunited with the neshamos of loved ones. And Sally had many, many loved ones. May her neshama be bound together with all other neshamos to the source of life.
So, as Sally's eldest grandchild, I was the first to hear that I was her favorite. Something that I got to hear again and again and again and again and again to all my other cousins sitting up here. We were all her favorites. She would always make trips, and before she was Mama, she was to my sister and I, Felice, Grammy, and also Grampsy. So Grammy and Grampsy would always make trips out to Pittsburgh for all of the little life events that my sister and I had growing up, and always in the summer, my sister and I, we would make the trip out to Chicago and spend 3 weeks with Grammy and Grampsy. And one of my favorite memories from those times is Grammy loved to make bubble baths for me. And one time she was pouring a bath and I wanted to help out. And so as water's coming out of the lower faucet into the bathtub, I accidentally or intentionally at the time turned on the shower faucet. And so Grammy's beautiful coif, half of it's gone, and it's like Two-Face from Batman, but all rage. And I've never seen Sally more upset than in that moment. It was a look of just why, and she was really trying hard not to laugh. So fast forward over time, like Sally and Irv would always travel outside of the country. They'd always come back with all of these amazing gifts. And one of the earliest pieces of advice that Sally gave me was to travel when you're young. And I truly took that to heart. And I've traveled around the world, and now as I was talking with Uncle Jeff the other day about getting old and getting injured, I can truly appreciate what she meant by that, to do it while you can. And one of the things that I loved was all the statues and knickknacks that her and Irv would bring back from around the world. And there's always a story behind every single one of them. And I went to Cambodia some time ago, and I came back with this big bronze statue that was 50 pounds, and I lugged it all over Southeast Asia with me. I almost got arrested from it. And I had so much joy telling Sallie this story. And she said, if there are any of my statues that you'd ever like, let me know. And when they were downsizing and moving out of their place on Estes, she showed up at my apartment with one of these statues. And if you remember it, it's just one of those kind of spiral modern ones with like brushed aluminum on top. And I really loved that statue. And then one day I'm cleaning my apartment and I pick it up and I see a receipt from Kohl's on the bottom. Sallie, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And a couple years ago, I get a call from Aunt Tammy that she's with my grandmother, and Sallie thinks it's her last day. And as I'm talking to her, just like, okay, I'll talk to you tomorrow. I truly thought Sallie would live forever. And I can't really imagine life without her. She was loved, she loved us, and thank you all for coming.
Born in New York, Sallie Sitnick, at a young age, along with her parents, Charles and Ida, and her brothers, Teddy and Sidney, would move to Chicago. It's said that she was the little princess who her brothers and parents would spoil. How many young girls get horseback riding lessons? Her mother, Ida, you said, would make her clothes, teach her to cook, along with other domestic skills, and spoke to her about one of the primary lessons in life, that is, how to catch a man and keep your husband happy. Sallie learned well and maintained a talent for flirtiness into her long years. After Roosevelt High School, she would attend 1 year of college at the U of I Navy Pier campus, and there she would meet Irving Blackman. She was in her freshman year, and thus it was time to unleash her mother's advice. It was over dissecting a dead cat in biology class that they would first bond. When she was asked if she was smitten the moment she saw him, Sallie, as only Sallie could do, retorted, "Irv looked good next to a dead cat." Borrowing a short paragraph from Irv's eulogy, I just wish to share this. She told me Irv initially wanted to go to medical school, but then he shifted his path. Sallie had one path, her MRS degree. When she met, he asked Sallie out, but she declined. Her excuse was she had to babysit her niece, and Irv said, "I'll accompany you." After 2 years of dating and 1 year of engagement, they would finally marry in 1950 at the Covenant Club, then take a train to Oakton Manor for a honeymoon away. And that led to 68 years of marriage. They would build a wonderful home together and be blessed with 3 children who brought into her life wonderful children-in-law, who she adopted into her heart. There's Linda, of course, Jeff and Cheryl, Tammy and Alan. Irv and Sallie each adopted their traditional roles in the house, Irv being the working man and Sallie, to quote Roseanne Barr, the domestic goddess. She was not a proud feminist seeking anything more than her role as mother and homemaker while her hubby took care of her needs. And should she need something from him, all she needed to do was call out, if you didn't hear that, it was, It worked out nicely, including that Irving loved to garden, and he loved the flower garden he had in the back, and Sallie loved flowers. Thus, he would cultivate and present her with dahlias and roses often. However, during the Chicago winters, he would need to go out and buy her flowers, and at one point in time, you taught me that money became a little bit tight, and Sallie suggested maybe he not buy her flowers anymore. After a 50-year lapse of time, once they had moved down to Florida, it was flower time again, and he would often bring her home large bouquets from Costco. Regarding money, the family shared an interesting story with me about a silver moment that was missed. Sallie, driving her car, I think usually a Cadillac, you said, was getting gas for her car. And a man, unbeknownst to her, came up to her and whispered, "Diet right. Invest. Diet right." And he casually walked away. Thinking he was, as we would say, a bissel meshuggah, she ignored it and thus missed a lifetime moment, often having remorse. Irv and Sallie spent many years in their home in Lincolnwood and made the most of living in that community. Irv would get involved with the Niles Booster Club. Sallie would join Irv in working with the Lincolnwood Festival, through which they made wonderful young friends, you said, and she would join the Beautification Committee. They each had their own connection with the Lincolnwood Police. Irv gave his time to the Police Pension Board, and Sallie used to drop off some baked goods to them and be a volunteer neighborhood watcher. They appreciated her so much that Sallie often had a squad car at her house. They would just stop and check in. As a united pair, there's actually, Jeff showed this to me, a resolution in Lincolnwood Village that June 4th, 205 was proclaimed Sallie and Irv Blackman Day on the occasion of their 55th wedding anniversary. After he would pass, she had to, of course, reinvent herself, as he was always so attentive to her needs. You said she learned to administer her own medications and became a much more independent woman in other ways as well. Along with her Lincolnwood Festival volunteerism, she would also find time to volunteer at the Northwest Suburban Jewish Congregation. That was the family synagogue. And there she would join her dear friend Myrna as they focused on merchandise and running the gift shop and took part in the fashion shows, and how proud she was to be able to raise monies for the sisterhood through doing all of these things. She would later come to volunteer at the Evanston Hospital, where she would help people in the surgical family waiting area feel just a little bit more welcome. Sallie had a penchant for visiting people in hospitals as well. It's called the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, visiting the ill. And she was always gracious to bring them some small token or possibly even some of her renowned baked goods. Sallie also possessed a thing for funerals. You said she always felt good attending a funeral and then afterwards rating them, calculating the number of people who showed up. But she also would bring food to someone's shiva. Her tray of goodies was often ungepatscht, we would say. It was always fancy. There would be flowers and chocolate-dipped strawberries, thanks to you, Cheryl, and other delicacies. And though there's no award for the best shiva platter, Sallie wasn't taking any chances, and she gave the best she could. She was involved and active no matter where she was, even at Elevate, her care residence, where she was elected into the residence board. And while Sallie had many opinions on many things, she did make things somewhat difficult for her caregivers at times, especially the male staff. When she passed, you said people came to pay their respects with tears in their eyes. They knew that the cactus had thorns, but they also knew the sweet milk in her veins. And family wanted to make a notable acknowledgement of her nurses Helka, Shin, and Yasmin, who were generously kind to her, one of them offering a sentiment, not verbatim, but such as, how can she really be gone? She is that force du jour. And the family wishes to note the expert care of Moments Hospice and their staff, notably Michelle and Keeley. I'd like to offer an opportunity now for, I don't know which order, I imagine Linda, and then Jeffrey, to offer some of their thoughts.
Somebody else's speech. Yours? Okay, thank you. I held my mom's right hand as she took her last breath. I held her hand, and there were two of us next to me, two from Elevate holding my hand, and then Helka, who was just mentioned, was on the other side holding my mom's other hand. And she took her last breath, and we all looked at each other and we couldn't believe it. Helka checked. My mom was gone. But not really. She would like the turnout. I called my mom very often ma mère. There's so many memories. Here are some quick recollections and stories, which I've titled My Mom, Ma Mère, Top 5 Memorable Categories. Number 1, because we haven't heard enough about it yet, would be baking. Mom would freeze much of what she would bake. She had a particular way of which she would freeze things, and there was this big, really big freezer in the basement. And she preferred to take her baked goods and freeze them in boxes, preferably from Saks Fifth Avenue, shirt boxes, or Bloomingdale's, or some other high-end store. So when she presented her baked goods to somebody, they looked extra special. She would take these boxes, and there would be layer 1 of maybe haystacks or strudel, or sometimes it was a pecan pie, and that wouldn't go in the box. But in many of these boxes were these amazing Rocky Road brownies. Tammy and I really like those. And Tammy liked the top, which is kind of fudgy, and I liked the bottom, which was kind of chewy. Now, Tammy and I would visit these boxes very often. We would take the pieces and move them around. We thought we wouldn't get found out then. But then sometimes my mom, who loved to play mahjong, I could hear like those mahjong tiles, like bam and crack and this and that. Where are those pastries? Tammy and I were very busy. My mom took one of these pastry boxes to Wave Radio, which is in Naples, Florida, one holiday season. She really, really loved the music on Wave Radio, and those announcers, their voices, they just spoke to her. So she went there with a box. She's knocking at the door, and she's walking around, and nobody answers her. It was Muzak. There were no humans there. She had to leave with her box. Number 2 would be kitchen and food. Oh my gosh, we've heard about kitchen and food, and I might even mention something that's been mentioned before. Our kitchen was a gathering place for talking, for friends, for baked goods, for milk goods. Not milk goods, it could have been milk goods, but milkshakes. And oh my gosh, the foods that she would make, an outstanding baker and cook. Gefilte fish on the holidays. She took my grandma Ida, that was her mom's, wooden bowl and gave me the chopper. There were 3 different types of fish. Chop, 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 chop. And she would give it to people, and people would love it. And then as she got older, she gave the privilege to Cheryl, and she loved Cheryl's gefilte fish. The beautiful smells of Shabbos wafting through the home on a Friday night, the roasted chicken, the chicken soup. Then there were those Sunday nights. Okay, Sunday nights would be Chinese food. And my mom kept a kosher home. She was beautiful with traditions and keeping kosher. And my mom, on Sunday nights, would bring in the Chinese food. And because we had milchiks and fleischiks and kept kosher, underneath the oven, there was a drawer. And she would pull it out. Came the third set of silverware, it had to be silverware, for the treif, for the Chinese food, with the paper dishes. In the skilled nursing facility where my mom lived, she always had an abundance of items to share with people, including her V8 juice, clementines, if we couldn't get it to her. Sari, a dear family friend, always made sure my mom had her clementines. Baby Bell cheese. That was a favorite. As my mom was in her last day of life, people were coming in, taking from the bag of Baby Bell cheese. Oh, my mom loved to feed people. It was one of her favorite things to do. And my mom had a special way of communicating. You've heard a little bit about that. So when I was growing up, I remember my mom had lots of plaques and sayings around. She had a plaque that said, "A woman can take more money out of the home with a scoop than a man can bring in with a shovel." Another one I remember is, "Behind every successful man stands a woman telling him he's wrong." If my dad were here, you know what he'd say to that one. My mom, when I was a teenager and I was dating, she didn't want to necessarily say, "It's time for him to go home." She would begin clearing her throat. If I would miss that cue, she would begin flushing the toilet once. If I missed that cue, it was incessant toilet flushing, constant, constant, constant. We already heard the story about how my mom met my dad in the lab dissecting a cat. And of course, she maintained that my father looked good next to that cat. In spite of her sharp wit and tongue, they really loved each other. Okay, so they fought a lot too, but they really, really loved each other. I can hear, "Arr!" And then my dad responding with, not honey, but honey. Honey, I can still hear them. I just know that he's waiting for my mom. My dad loved his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Cheryl and Jeff, you took such great care of her. You were the closest. You were there. Thank you for everything you did. Tammy and Alan, Mom would call me and talk to me about all the wonderful things that you were doing, how you'd be traveling here and there, and Alan, how you made her laugh. She absolutely loved that. Ian, when you were born, you were right. You were her favorite. Then so was my daughter, Felice. Felice, she so wanted to dance at the wedding that's upcoming for you and Russ. I know that her spirit will be there dancing with us. Jeffrey's children, Chad, Amanda, and Brittany. She loved you so much. And Brittany, you had the good sense to bring Rob into our family. Thank you. And then came Sloan and Charlie. I could just see her. She would be on the phone with me doing FaceTime. I want to hold them like this. I just want to hold them. She told me she was going to be a great-great-grandmother. I thought she was a little confused because that would make her a generation older. But then she said to me, "No, Linda, great. I am a great-grandmother." Tammy's children, Josh brought beautiful Battelle into our lives. And Dana and David, oh, Mama, how she loved you so very, very much. She loved all of us. She loved all of you. If you're here, she liked you, she loved you, she fought with you, she made up, she loved you. Number 4, beautification and making things better. Okay, so we've heard that she was perfectly dressed, perfectly coiffed. I would like you to take a look at the picture here and imagine at some point it was really popular to wear your hairdo up like here, like a bird's nest. So there were things that we might have stuck in her hair without her knowing, and you would touch it and people thought that it would actually crack. Well, I think that it did. She volunteered at Lincolnwood Jewish Congregation, as we heard mentioned. I know the first fashion show that she took me to was for Chico's 40 years ago. And the only reason I know it's 40 years ago is Chico's had a new top out for its 40th year this year, and I bought it. It reminded me of being with my mom. She helped the Lincolnwood Jewish Congregation with their rummage sales and more. She ran the gift shop, and when I called the Lincolnwood Jewish Congregation to tell them that my mom was gone, I was told by the office manager, "We have been getting calls all day long. I'm so glad you called. And for the past couple of years, people have been calling looking for her, and we didn't know where she was." She was so loved. She worked on the beautification committee in Lincolnwood. She organized the Lincolnwood Fest, which when I was talking to someone today, they told me she started that back in the 1990s, and I looked it up online, and the next one, if you'd like to attend, is going to be at the end of July. My mom kept that beautiful home. Oh my gosh, we've heard so much about the home. And the floors were always so clean. I didn't get that gene from my mom, I'm just saying. She kept the home impeccably clean. When I had to buff the floors, I had to go do it this way. If I went zig, 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 zigs, I had to go back and do it again. The vacuuming that my nephew mentioned, you could see the footsteps. She wasn't happy. And then we had what we called the DMZ, which the children knew about and all of her caregivers knew about. It wasn't demilitarized zone, it was demother zone. You got near her, do this, do that, do this, do that, do this, do that. And we did. Number 5 is family and friends. She maintained close friendships with friends from childhood, with friends that she made later in life. We would be standing in a restaurant line, and she would come back and say, "Jeff, Tammy, Linda, listen to what this woman told me about her life." She would know the woman's life or the man's life. She always wanted her family to be close and together as often as possible. She would be glad that we are all here today. In the last days of her life, a rabbi came to her, and she was no longer communicative at this point. And he said a prayer to her in Hebrew and in English. At the moment that he said, "Forgive yourself and forgive others," she took a deep sigh. We were told that the hearing is the last to go. I know my mom would say, if there's anybody in this room who you're having difficulty with, reach out to them, let them reach out to you. Life is short, in this case, 94 years old short. Make your amends and move forward. She's felling, we're all here. She loved her children and grandchildren, as I said, like crazy, and maybe she drove us a little crazy. She would call us a lot. You can't imagine. The last time I have a message from my mom, which is only 15 seconds long, was on October 7th. Oh, maybe not. Let's see if I can make it go to the speakerphone or the speaker.
To the old message or the new one that just came in. So please let me know. Thank you.
For some reason, the one from September 12th came up. I'll tell you what my mom said. Good Shabbos. And I think my mom's channeling me. She couldn't figure out her phone sometimes either. We all know that. Look, my mom would want all of us to continue to be in touch, to be happy. When you dance, think of my mom. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Out of curiosity, how many of you were in this very room in February of 2019 at my dad's funeral? Many of you. And as you may or may not know, Dad's funeral was actually nominated for and won 2 Golden Globes. Whatever sense of fashion or style that I might have, it came from Mom. I assure you, not Dad. But as a tribute to Mom, beneath my suit, at this very moment, I am also wearing a dress from Chico's. And I feel pretty. You are probably familiar with the phrase, turning over in one's grave. Well, that is not something that Mom can do yet. But if you pay special attention to her casket, I assure you, she is going to start to spin. If you knew her, if you really knew her, you knew that she could be charming or challenging, fun or frustrating, exciting or exhausting, all in the span of 5 minutes. But what you probably didn't know is that she also had the uncanny ability to be wickedly funny and dirty and raunchy and bawdy. I have supportive evidence. Linda, when she was in high school, about the age of 17, meant I was about 13, and that meant that Tammy was about 8. And Linda had this incredible joke. And she said, JB, tonight is the night I'm telling the joke at dinner. And I said, this will be fun. Here's the joke. Because Mom and Dad always look forward to hearing about our day, what happened, what transpired, anything you'd like to know, something to share. And Linda said, I have a question. Here was Linda's question. What goes in long and hard and comes out soft and gushy? Now, the punchline is a stick of gum. That's the punchline. Linda poses the question, what goes in long and hard? And before she could deliver the punchline, my mom says, your father. This is the environment we grew up in. FOMO. You're familiar with FOMO, fear of missing out. We are pretty sure Mom invented the strategy. Whether it's applicable to our lives as children, our grandchildren, an extended family of dear friends like Harry Pearl or Siri Slivnik London, Mom always wanted to be part of whatever you had going on, even if it didn't involve her. Over time, she would say, do you remember the time that? And she would tell us a story that included her. She was never there. But one time she was, in particular. My dear brother-in-law, Alan, who I love dearly, his dad, Irv Brown, was a remarkable human being. And when Irv passed, Cheryl and I drove Mom and Dad, along with a caregiver, to Irv Brown's funeral and service in South Bend, Indiana. It was a cold, nasty winter day. Following the service indoors, we went outdoors to then be at the graveside burial. And my mom insisted, Cheryl and Jeffrey, get me to the graveside. We said no. The ground is soft, it is wet, it is dangerous. Get me to the graveside. No, we will not allow you to walk or wheel the wheelchair. It is dangerous. Cheryl and I came up with a solution. We took Cheryl's cell phone and called my mom's cell phone so that they would be able to hear the service on the speakerphone. Before Cheryl and I left, we said, put your phone on mute. What? Put your phone on mute. Why? Because you and Dad cannot say anything. We made her prove that the telephone was on mute. The service goes on for about 15 minutes. The strategy is actually working pretty well. And then there's that brief moment of silence right before you start to place the dirt atop the coffin. When suddenly, blaring out of the telephone, you hear Mom, "Hey, Irv, I think now is when they're putting on the dirt." When we got back to the car, I said, "Why did you take the telephone off of mute?" Her response, "I didn't." Mom was always present. She was always there, as you've heard. When I think of my athletic time, if I was playing baseball, she was in the stands. If I was playing basketball, she was at courtside. If I was playing soccer, she was on the sidelines. Almost 10 years ago at my 40th high school reunion, I chatted with John Hosada, and he said to me, "What I really remember about 4 years of soccer together is not our time on the pitch, but if I looked to the sideline, I would always see and hear your mom cheering you on, cheering me on, cheering all of us on. Your mom was always present, except one time when neither Mom nor Dad was present." Let me take you back to September of 1964. September of 1964, Linda was 12 and I was 8. Mom and Dad took us to a concert. Let me explain what I mean by took us to a concert. They dropped us off at 7 p.m. and said, "We will pick you up at 11 p.m. at the Chicago Amphitheater for the concert." Let me repeat. Linda is 12. I am 8. They dropped us off at the Chicago Amphitheater and said, "We'll see you in 4 hours." Today, that would be called child abandonment, and they would still be serving time. Ironically, every year on the anniversary, though, of that concert, my mom would actually get a call. "Sallie, how you doing? It's Ringo." Could have happened. Google it. Mom loved sports, especially baseball and hockey. If we went to a game at Wrigley Field to see our beloved Cubs, Mom always bought grandstand seats. But she would flirt her way with the Andy Frayne ushers, and for the 3rd inning through the 9th, we sat in boxed seats. She also loved hockey. She loved her Blackhawks. And Mom and Dad actually became very friendly with the Blackhawks because of a business opportunity that Dad had. I'd come home from grammar school, and literally in the kitchen or the dining room really would be Bobby Hull or Stan Mikita or Eric Nestorenko. But they were just friends of the family. So that enabled us to get pretty terrific seats for Blackhawk games. And because of that, the Blackhawks were kind enough to allow Mom, in a game in the mid-60s between periods, to clean the ice as she drove the Zamboni. Could have happened. As you've heard, image, public perception was very important to Mom. And Linda shared with you the significance of trafe, non-kosher silverware. So that was pretty common for Chinese food, as Linda mentioned, or Italian food. But annually, there is one special event. Our next door neighbor, Sol and Ida Schulman, Ida was a terrific cook. On an annual basis, she would bake a ham, slice it thinly so Dad and I could enjoy the meal. Well, Dad and I were enjoying the meal with our paper plates. Mom took great pride in giving us the ham, and we used the trafe silverware. Until Mom glanced out of the dining room window and said, "Oh my God, Al and Gertie Schiff are coming up the sidewalk. They are religious and keep kosher. Jeffrey, hide the ham. How do you want me to do that? Grab Dad's plate, grab your plate, run into the dining room, on one of the side chairs, put the ham down and sit on it. And that's exactly what I did. Gertie and Al Schiff come into the kitchen. Dad greets them with a warm hug. Mom greets them with a warm hug. And my dad, who many of you knew, who was brilliant but a big character, says to me as I'm plopped on the ham, Jeffrey, it's rude to stay seated. Get up and say hi. Related to perception, when I was 13, on the day before, she's not ready yet. The day before my bar mitzvah, my mom turned to me and said, Jeffrey, you're only 13, but you already have a black mustache. Your bar mitzvah pictures should not include a black mustache. I said, this is not a big deal. I will just shave. No. Once you start shaving, you will never stop. And I said, well, what is your suggestion? My mom said 2 words that to this day still frighten me. Depilatory wax. She proceeded to drape across my mustache depilatory wax. And then at the count of 3, she said, are you ready? I said, ready for what? I've really never done this before. And on 2, she went, I didn't speak to my mom for 4 years after that. But she was right. At my bar mitzvah, there are no pictures of me with a black hairy mustache. Instead, my mustache was red from the burn. Cheryl and I met at the age of 18. We've been married now for 41 plus years. So my mom knew her for close to 50 years, and she loved my wife. And my wife was a doting daughter-in-law. Even though at times my mom could be incredibly challenging and say some remarkable things to Cheryl, like, honey, this piece of lint on your dress, did you want it to stay there? Oh, Cheryl, I noticed that your nylons have got a run. Is that the pair you'd prefer to keep on? But over time, it was really interesting to watch the relationship evolve, where Mom started to engage with Cheryl so she could provide the food. And Cheryl's a terrific cook, just like my mom was. Cheryl's a terrific baker, just like my mom was. She'd really look forward to homemade challah, homemade gefilte fish, homemade brisket, homemade kugel. And all of those things have been sliced finely and are actually inside, right now, Mom's casket. Again, could be. Mom was at Elevate for close to 3 years. Cheryl and I would typically see her on the weekend or sometimes during the week as well. We spent a lot of time with her over the past 3 years. Not just to visit, but to really replenish her inventory. As you've heard, oranges, cheese, ginger ale, water, charging cords, prune juice, the list ongoing. After a while, though, Cheryl and I are pretty well convinced Mom was not consuming this on her own. We're pretty confident that Mom had actually created a black market at Elevate. She was selling these things at a significant profit. At Elevate, she would often say funny things. As Cheryl and I were leaving her, she would often say to the nurses, "Who are my nurses for the next shift?" as if she in some way might be able to influence or control who her nurses might be. When Mom found out who her nurses were, I turned to her and I said, "Hey, Mom, that's terrific news. It sounds like you are in good hands." She said, "Like Allstate." And I said, "Yes, Mom, like Allstate, or perhaps even like Geico." She said, "Jeffrey, did you just say I'm psycho?" At Elevate, Mom had a call light. Her call light was always on. And if she couldn't get within what she defined as an appropriate time constraint, she would call me, Cheryl, Alan, Tammy, Linda, and then she would start working the grandchildren. They always honored whatever commitment that she needed within really a defined time constraint. But if it didn't satisfy her perception of time, Mom would place one additional call for the things that she wanted. She would actually call 911 multiple times. She actually once called 911 and said, "I'm cold. Please bring me a blanket." And they did. Riverwoods has now abandoned their 911 service. My dad would often say that life is a series of adjustments, and we learn to adjust without Dad. Now we need to learn to adjust without Mom. The phone calls have stopped. The voicemails have stopped. The conversations beginning with "I want," "I need," or "go get me" have stopped. But what will never stop is my love, your love, and our collective memories of Mom. Mom, I love you.
Everybody comes up and speaks, comes off, gets a hug. I get nothing. No. Sallie had a quest for perfection in her appearance and her domicile. She could also demand and command it from her children and others around her. She would spend lengthy time, you told me, in front of a mirror making sure her makeup and her lotions were applied perfectly and that her hair, which was always flawless, sometimes so much that she forgot the time of day and could periodically, or as you would say, always, arrive late to places. That hair was something truly to behold. I've seen pictures, and you said one of the grandchildren actually labeled it the helmet. And though she was a committed smoker, she somehow managed to never carry that scent on her, you said. You see, Sallie had all manner of beauty secrets to be sure to look fancy. Her other focus was her house and its immaculate condition. When Sallie vacuumed, you said there was a technique, a roadmap, if you will, of proper patterns in the carpet. There was no room at all for footprints afterwards. Although I heard that, Alan, you may have gotten off the hook a few times when you were dating Tammy and visiting the house, but after your visit, you should know she would vacuum again. She would freshly mop the kitchen floor or clean the kitchen floor meticulously and then cover it with newspaper to keep off any footprints. And then there was the generational custom of plastic on the couches. Walls were not to be scuffed, and she washed them fastidiously, even behind the refrigerator. And in the Floridian home, she would make Alan get up on a chair in the step stool to wipe out the vents. It was common Sallie would make the family great pancake breakfasts, I was told, when your family and Irv and Sallie would come down to Florida together. You joked when recalling how the grandchildren did not always follow the rules of order when it came to tidiness when Sallie wasn't there. Quite often, they would play with her designer pillows and toss them around and make small forts or the like. One day you said the dog found his way up upon the table, liberated some of those pancakes from the plate, and hid them in a pile of Sallie's pillows. Noticing the pancakes were missing, you thought the children ate them, but sometime later you would find them hidden in the pillows, still laden with syrup. And you said that remained a family secret pretty much until now. And how the grandkids loved coming to her house, and they knew where to go to find her baked goods. They would sneak a few nibbles of it, even right out of the freezer if there were no fresh ones yet. And there were always toys, either in the bottom dresser drawer or in the family room. And I was told the Hanukkah was the jackpot, because on the basement pool table, it would always be strewn with packages for you to come down. Sallie was just always trying to do her best for you. And her car was always washed, and her grill methodically scoured. And her trash cans in the house, even the ones in the powder room, were often emptied before you even knew it. They were for decor, not for functionality. She loved to showcase her home and have your friends come over as often as you wished. And she would be sure to have ample baked goods and even make them some brandy slush. Some of her well-known and celebrated delicacies, you've heard some of them, were haystacks, strudel, chocolate chip cheesecake squares, baklava, teiglich, mandel bread, powdered chocolate chip brownies, and lemon squares. How she was able to create such a big production of food from such a small kitchen was confounding, Cheryl said with admiration. And the savory foods, kugel, brisket. She also had a tradition of making gefilte fish, and Irv was her partner in making the chrein, the horseradish. Was her fish the best of all? Touchy subject. But it was good, and it was always made from scratch. No matter her best effort to make it a lovely presentation on the plate, Irv would take a piece onto his plate and mash it as soon as he touched it. Linda and Tammy noted that he mashed a lot of his foods. And when Sallie would shop for fish, she would demand from the store to give her the best of the best cuts of meat, or a cleaned, plucked chicken. And the deli butchers and the fish salesmen all knew when Sallie was coming, as her demand needed to be met. There were known to be some high-volume exchanges between Sallie and the people behind the counter. Cheryl said that she was concerned to go to the store to pick up her own order, afraid they would confuse one Blackman with the other. So her orders were always under Cantor. Again, Sallie just wanted the best for her family, and feeding people was her love language. She succeeded with whomever she came in touch, feeding her in her home, except maybe for Myrna. She adored her children and could be, like her mandel bread, a tough cookie. When they were in college, Sallie would chide Linda and Tammy about working too hard, studying too hard, staying in college too long, and they should just get out there and find that right man. Though Tammy said Sallie did vicariously enjoy and love your college sorority years, vicariously living through you. She liked to be in the know. She would be in constant contact with many of you via her regular phone calls and her good Shabbos calls. You told me the other day you could envision her sitting in her kitchen on the chair, cuddled up next to her phone. And more recently, maybe the cell phone strapped around her wrist so she wouldn't drop it. Many of you, I'm told, were invited to a special call with Sallie as she was holding court on her, if I may, farewell tour. Her phone was her lifetime when her mobility waned. She also, though, on her phone had another lifeline, Siri, which she used liberally. And fortunately for her friend Sari, you changed her name to Sophie so she wouldn't be getting all the Siri phone calls. Sari, the person, was someone whom the family very much appreciated, and thanks you for your kindness. I heard that your mom Estelle and Sallie were very close friends, and your daughter-like attentiveness to Sallie was a blessing. I should also make note that another quasi-adopted child into her life was Harry Pearl, so much so a fourth child to her that his children referred to Sallie as Sarah Graham, as if she were her surrogate grandma. Sallie loved you all, but she also loved dogs, so. And she loved Frank Sinatra, and she loved Neil Diamond, and she loved Nel Bleu de Pinto du Bleu, beautiful songs. The important thing is that you know you loved one another, and her neshama, her soul, is finding its path to peace. And I hope that you're blessed to retain all of your precious memories for many years to come. If you're able to stand comfortably and listen to the memorial prayer, I ask you to do so. Otherwise, please remain seated. Malei rachamim, shochein b'amromim, hametzei menucha, tacha kanfei ashkina, b'malot kidoshim u'torim, k'zohar arakia mazirim, et nishmat Sima bat Yechezkel, Shalecha li olama, v'gan eden tehei menuchata, Ana bal rachamim, hasireha b'seter knafecha li olamim, u'tzeror b'trachayim et nishmata, Adonai. Nachlata v'tanuach mishalom amishkava v'nomar Amen. Dear God, compassionate God, we pray that you grant an infinite rest amongst your holy and pure souls within the heavens to a new soul, the soul of Sallie Blackman. She has come to dwell within her eternal home. We ask that this loved individual find a perfect peace in your eternal embrace, that her soul be bound up in the bonds of life, and that the next time this family has reason to gather only be the sweetest of days. Amen.
The interment will take place at Memorial Park Cemetery in Skokie. For those of you driving in procession, we will make sure that you receive an orange funeral safety stickers to be placed in the inside portion of your front windshield, as well as a magnetic flag for your car. Please remember to use your emergency flashers and your bright lights when in procession. Shiva will begin today at Max and Benny's restaurant at 461 Waukegan Road in Northbrook, following the interment, approximately 5 p.m. until 8:30 this evening, with Minyan at 7:30 p.m. And then Shiva will resume at Jeff and Cheryl Blackman's home in Glenview. The address is 2105 Dauntless Drive, Saturday evening from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., and on Sunday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. All this information is listed in the service folder that you received on your way in. If you did not receive one, we have them as you leave today. It also has the memorial contributions information and the Shiva coordinator's contact info. At this time, I'll ask the following individuals, the family members, to step forward that are serving as pallbearers: Ian Deason, Felice Deason, Chad Blackman, Brittany Schwartz, Rob Schwartz, Amanda Blackman, Josh Brown, Batel Brown, Dana Brown, and David Brown. We'll ask everyone else to please rise as the casket is escorted from the chapel. Pallbearers, we're going to